for everyone listening, this is a long game. There is no shortcut with this process. You have to be really serious about building a brand of substance. And you have to give substance on the podcast. Otherwise, people aren't going to come back and listen.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcasters, it's your host, Adam Adams, and I'm stoked to have Kelly Roach with us today. And I was just listening to her podcast and learning a whole bunch about how to make your own business sellable and scalable. And she said there was one thing, and so I'll have to put the episode down in the show notes for you. Today, we're talking to somebody who has multiple businesses and built a podcast to benefit those businesses. And that's where the businesses came from. And so if you are thinking, all right, I've got my company, I want to do better, I want to get to the next place, I think you're going to learn a lot from Kelly today. So Kelly, it's really good to have you. And I've got a couple questions. Some of them we may have asked in the green room, and that's okay. You're going to have to answer it again. What do you want to share? What's the big takeaway that a brand new podcaster should have from you?
The most important thing is to play the long game and to understand that podcasting has the power to change your entire business and your life, but it's not an overnight success. That's why they say most overnight successes are 15 years in the making. So keep that in mind as you embark on your podcasting journey.
You've done like 1,200 or so episodes as we're recording. And I'm curious, when does the long game start and finish? Because we might be listening and thinking, all right, what if I do 1,200 episodes and I never am famous? Do I just keep going? Or they might say, do I just hit 30 and that means that I'm there? Is there a number to that?
The way I think about podcasting is it's you leaving a lasting legacy of impact. And what you'll learn is once you start making a whole bunch of money, which I have, the thing that actually is most rewarding in life is contribution. And your podcast doesn't have an end goal or an end date because it is simply a platform for contribution. And when you're in the early stages of building your business, your podcast can do a whole lot to help you as you're building your brand and as you're growing your businesses. But even if I was never going to make another dime, never make another sale, never get another client, I would continue my podcast probably for the rest of my life because it's leaving legacy and it's spreading contribution in the lessons that you've learned, the stories that you tell, the great information and wisdom that you can share.
And the storytelling that you just mentioned is something that when I looked you up and I wanted to find more about you, it also talks about how you're a really good storyteller. And I'm hearing that and I'm thinking that the listener might not have that yet or might not have it as well. So what do? We're a new podcaster. We want to grow. We want it to benefit our business. How do we use stories? Would you mind sharing your technique with us?
Absolutely. And full transparency, I don't consider myself a good storyteller. So I appreciate you saying that.
I'll say because you were a journalist and an entrepreneur and advocate, like it's talking about how one of the big things you're well known for is your storytelling.
Thank you. Well, no, I appreciate that. So here's what I'll say, right? You may not think that you have stories to tell, but of course you do. Because if you're still alive, then that means you've gone through things. And all of the best stories are the things that they didn't kill you, so they made you stronger. Those are the best stories to tell. So everyone listening to this podcast, it doesn't have to be that you climbed Mount Everest and now you're going to talk about your story of climbing Mount Everest. It's whatever challenges, hurdles, obstacles, lessons, struggles, failures, comebacks you've had in your life. That could be on a sports team. That could be in an internship. That could be in an early job that you held. That could be in a relationship. That could be with your health. That could be in any area of your life. Maybe you used to be in a lot of debt and you got out of debt. There's endless ways that you can find stories to tell. And I think the big question that you have to ask yourself is, what are those things in your life that they didn't break you, they didn't kill you, but they definitely challenged you? Those are the best stories to tell.
Yeah, I like that. And I've also noticed with me, sometimes when you share a story like that with your struggle or anything, where you show the deeper part of you, people start to resonate and get to know you. And I think they're more likely to do business with you if you're an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. People want to do business with people that they feel like they can know and trust. And so it's less of a transaction and more of a relationship. And that's why podcasting has taken the main stage. We even saw that it had a major influence in this election that just happened. And the reason why is that when people listen to a podcast, they can get a deeper understanding of this person that's in front of them. They feel like they can know you and have more intimacy in understanding who you are, what you're about, all of those things, versus maybe a short, less than a minute video or a 30-second clip or a story, the way that they're used to interacting with a lot of digital media.
I stayed as far away as I could from this election. Mm-hmm. You can judge me if you want. But I want to hear, because I did that, when you said that it had a major impact, would you mind sharing what you mean by that?
I'm not here to talk to anyone about politics. That's not my gig. But I wrote an analysis the next morning and I sent out a huge debrief to my audience of all of the trends that we will see in business in 2025 because of these things that we just saw. Now, what we saw with Trump getting elected was that Barron, his son, who is almost young adult, was basically coaching him and telling him all of these various podcasts to get on. He opened up a massive segment of the market that probably, in all honesty, wouldn't have voted or wouldn't have voted for him. And this had a major influence in the results of the election. Him going on Joe Rogan for 3 hours, when before, a lot of the only exposure that people had to him was very short clips that were being spun by traditional media that only showed what they wanted to show.
Yeah.
Whereas when he was going on all of these very long form podcasts and people heard him speak directly and gave the in-depth explanation, that absolutely moved voters, that absolutely shifted and shaped the election. And the reason why I wrote about that to my audience is we are in a trust recession. Okay. And what that means is buyers have been burnt. They are being far more discerning in the investments that they're making, in the buying decisions that they're making. They have less disposable income. And so they're turning more towards long form content, such as podcasting, to deepen their awareness of this person that they're considering doing business with to make a buying decision. So if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur, especially a new one, it is more important than ever that you are creating and delivering long form content, because it's what people are consuming and it's what they're going to use to actually go beneath the surface of what they're seeing about you on social media.
I have a few examples of people that have hired me as a coach to help them with their podcast, invested with me alongside for buying some big apartment buildings. And it came from that type of thing. And I want to hear you share your story with your wisdom, with your ups and downs, with your insights, to help us, the listener, to also be able to know how we are to do that. How can we talk about ourselves in the way that you're talking that will bring business to us as well?
Yeah, I think, first of all, you need to teach what you know, like plain and simple. When people don't know what to speak about or what to teach about or how to share, it's because you're trying to stretch yourself into a space that you don't belong in. So the number one thing with podcasting to get started right away and have endless streams of content is to be clear on what is your gift? What area do you have knowledge and expertise in? What is your experience? What is the thing that you know so intimately and so well that you could speak on that topic for hours, not need notes, not be following a slide deck, not be reading a script, but instead speaking from the heart? That is what you need to be podcasting about. And everyone has that. Maybe for you, it's gardening, or maybe for you, it's sports. So maybe you collect collectibles of some kind. My husband collects records, for example. Like whatever that is, everybody has something. Now, let's say you're like, Kelly, that's not the thing that I want to make my podcast about, but there's always lessons. There's always a connection point that you can make. So you start with what you know intimately. Be natural. Don't follow a script. I think the worst user experience is when you go in and you listen or interact with someone that you can tell they're reading from a script. You can tell that everything is a canned answer. No one wants that. It is.
I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I got a question on that. Your podcast was so perfect. Like when I was listening to it, it was so polished. It was like you knew what you were going to say right after, not that you were thinking about it. And I literally sat there thinking, is she just the best ever at reading something, but sounding like she's not reading? Or is she like, so knows this content so well that it just flows?
Yeah. That's what happens when you do 1,200 episodes. And not only that, but for 6 years now, I've gone on 2 shows of other people's every week. So you have to think if that's 4 shows I'm doing a week minimum, right? And I'm teaching what I know. So when I send my podcast to the editor, they don't actually edit my podcast. We don't do takes. We don't do retakes. I don't go back and do re-records, nothing. They are literally snipping the front, snipping the end, catching any like the doorbell rings or the dog barks or whatever. And that just happens with practice over time. There's no shortcut. You just run the reps, just like an athlete shows up for practice every day and they run the same basic drill thousands and thousands of times. Podcasting is the same way. Your first few episodes, you're going to be nervous. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're probably going to have a ton of edits because you're going to have to re-record 50 times. It's not going to be pretty. But if you keep running those drills and running those drills, eventually you will get to a place where you can speak from the heart totally naturally and record a 30-minute or an hour-long podcast without missing a beat.
It reminds me of a quote that I heard, but I don't think I'll be able to quote it exactly. And it was something to the effect of you practice not until you can get it, but you practice until you can't not get it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's
interesting. Good stuff. So with those 6 years, you've been doing 2 guest spots per week. And I want to know why. I think the listener wants to know why. They're probably curious why you're making that so intentional. Why is it 2 a week? Because some of us, we don't even try to get on other people's podcasts. So would you mind going into that?
Absolutely. It's for the reasons that I just explained about the presidential campaign. The way that I have been able to expand my audience and go beyond anything that I ever could have done on my own is by leveraging the power of other people's audiences. So today there's someone listening to this show that's Kelly Roach. Who the heck is this woman? But you know what? After this show is done, there's going to be people that are like, oh, yeah, Kelly Roach. And they'll probably come check out my show. And one of the biggest things, podcasters many times stop their podcast because they can't figure out how to grow their podcast. And one of the fastest, easiest ways to grow your podcast is by going on other podcasts. So you asked me at the beginning of the show, how have I grown the podcast? Not only is it promoting my shows to my own audience, but then every week going on new shows. And every single time I go on a podcast and they say at the end of it, where should our listeners go find you? Guess what I say at the end? The Kelly Roach Show. Because I know the most valuable thing that I can do is get people to consume my long form content. Way more valuable than following a social media post, or even sometimes more valuable than getting on my email list. Because if someone becomes an avid fan of the podcast, they're going to do all those things anyway. And I've seen that happen over and over again where people, my clients that I have today will tell me, I heard you on this show. Then I started listening to your show. And then I joined the program. But again, for everyone listening, this is a long game. There is no shortcut with this process. You have to be really serious about building a brand of substance. And you have to give substance on the podcast. Otherwise, people aren't going to come back and listen.
Yeah. For a listener who might not be as familiar with you, I want to talk a little bit about your history, but not your full bio. But I really want to talk about when you started your podcast, what businesses did you have or had you had prior to the day that you pushed launch for your show?
Yeah, the day that I pushed launch for my show, I had one business. I still have that business today.
That's the coaching?
That's my coaching company. It's called The Business Advisory, and it is now 11 years old. But yeah, and like I said, the podcast has allowed me to now segue into not only growing the coaching and consulting company, but my marketing agency, my networking company, my virtual business school, and several of the other brands that I've built.
And I've got a question on that, which hopefully there's a listener who's there with me. I'm a normal entrepreneur, which means I think I can do everything so well, so easy. I can make anything And I'm a good starter. Definitely tough sometimes to finish and stay through with something. I did real estate for a long time. I got it to where we were syndicating or raising money for larger apartment buildings. And then I didn't know what was going to happen with the market. And I switched to help people with podcasting. And I felt, what's the word for it? Scared or embarrassed, or what are people going to think? Like, I was always that real estate guy that was speaking at all the conferences. And now I'm trying to be this podcast guy. And also right now I'm really into fitness, and I'm thinking I want to help people get really healthy, eat right, and make it sustainable. And again, I've got those like fears inside that are like, what are they going to do about my podcast agency? Are they going to think that I quit it? Are they going to think that I can't cut it? Or I've got all of these thoughts. So you had your coaching business, you started your podcast, you started growing your coaching business, but it also took you into other directions. How did you go about that for somebody like me who's listening, and also me, you're going to coach me for free for a second. How did you go about doing that and maintain a brand or feel good about it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I always tell people. When you are deciding that you want to build out a new segment of the business or start another company or create a new product line that's different than your core focus, there's really 3 core things that you want to look at. 1, are you cash comfortable? 2, do you have a great leadership team? And 3, can the business survive with less of your attention? And that is the rule of thumb for how I make decisions every single time that I'm asking myself, am I in a position to start something new, to launch something new, to create a new business? I did not really start building these other companies until my coaching company was very well established, strong team, great leadership, really profitable, well known in our niche. And that's the biggest thing I would say to you and to everyone listening. We can do everything. We just can't do it at once. And people say to me all the time, oh, you should start this, you should start that. And I'm like, nope. I'm like, I committed to these companies that I have. And for the next 5 years, I need to stay laser beam focused on just growing these businesses that I already have until they meet all 3 of those criteria. And once they meet those 3 criteria, then I can say, okay, is there something else that I'm super passionate about that I want to commit to?
Yeah. And so again, that's being cash comfortable. Secondly, knowing your leadership team. And third, can this business survive if I'm not part of it without my attention?
Yeah.
And that's actually part of the episode that I was listening to and just today. In your show, I think it's your most recent episode, but it talked about being able to grow, to sell, or to scale. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that for a listener who's a podcaster who specifically wants to scale. I know one of the pieces already because I've listened to that episode, but maybe you could share with somebody who is a year or 2 into their business and a month or 2 into their podcast on just some direction that they can do to scale what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely start building a team right away. That's the first thing. It takes time. Many times you're not going to find the exact right person the first time. It's a process. It's a journey that takes time. So the first thing is you have to start building team right away. Because what most entrepreneurs do is they build a jail cell around themselves and they're doing everything and their hands are in everything. And all of a sudden they're like, I have no freedom. I'm not passionate about this anymore. And they don't love the business. And all the reasons why they started the business, they're not getting the benefits of that. And that's why building a winning team is absolutely crucial, especially if you're a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I can never do what I do. The only reason I get to do what I get to do is that I have a great team and I have leaders across my different companies. So I can act as the visionary. I can work in concept and I can work in big picture. And then I can drill down and allow the team to focus on the execution and the day-to-day implementation. And that's a really important thing to understand. The second thing is you need a brand. If you want to scale a company, you need a brand, right? Because scale in and of itself is going to refer to there's going to be systematic synergies that you're creating that give you leverage. And there's going to be multiplication and duplication, which means in some way, shape, or form, there has to be volume, which means you need a brand, which is why podcasting is so powerful. And then third one is you have to learn to launch. Because if you don't know how to launch, you can't sell one to many, right? Launching is a sales system that teaches you how to bring an idea to the market in an effective way and invite people in and close sales in volume all at once, which is necessary in order to create the actual customer acquisition scale process.
So with that third one, does that mean that if we launch a business and we didn't launch it with the right system, that we are probably going to be hindered? Or how do we go about that?
Most people don't, right? Most people don't. And it doesn't mean anything. It just means that you are where you are in your learning process. That's all that it means. And you can't, I say this all the time, you cannot learn business in theory. So the only way you become a great business leader is by making a whole lot of mistakes and not repeating them, and taking the lessons that you learn from doing it the wrong way or making a mistake or whatever and apply them when you do it the next time. Yeah, I wouldn't stress about that at all. Most things that you do really well that you get right in your business, the only reason why you do them well and got them right is because initially you did them really poorly and you got them wrong and you're like, not going to do that again. I'm going to do it this way instead. So no shame in that game. And I feel like that's how we all learn.
I have a couple questions based on building a team right away, that being the first thing. When we build a team, a lot of people say, no, I can't afford anyone. No, I can't bring on anyone because right now I'm only making $5,000 a month and I need a lot more from myself. And that would be splitting it up where my person would have $3,000 a month and I would be left with two or whatever. So I couldn't even bring on one person. I just want to understand from somebody who's been successful in doing a few businesses for sure, if we're thinking about bringing on somebody, do we wait until we have a whole bunch of money? Do we hire them early? How do you go about thinking of that? And maybe even also, who do you bring on first?
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple things to this, right? Like initially, as you're building the business in the very early stages, it's good to have another income source. So for me, for example, I kept my job while I was building because I knew that I didn't want to be in financial despair as I was building my business. That's not a great start to your entrepreneurial career. I think you need to have another income source. Number one. Number two is that you can, in the beginning, start by hiring fractional roles or interns, paid interns, people that are going to maybe be in a hybrid role. So there's so much flexibility in the workforce now. That's the second point. And then the third point is the first hire that every business owner should make should be someone that is going to take all of the admin, the operations, the day-to-day kind of low-level tactical things off their plate, because your primary job in those early stages is to get clients. It's to do sales and marketing and get clients. And so if you're spending your time doing scheduling, responding to emails, doing paperwork, admin, your business is not going to make it most likely, or you're just going to burn yourself out to such a degree that it's not going to be desirable to build it for you. So the first hire definitely needs to be that person. And then the second hire should be someone that does revenue production, someone that is learning how to help you with customer acquisition. And that's a huge mistake that I see people making all the time, which is they'll go hire 5 more people and they'll have no one on the team that is producing revenue. And that math just doesn't math. And that's why so many businesses are closing. It's why so many business owners are struggling so much, because it's like they set up the game in such a way that they could never win. You have to set up the game in a way that you can win, which means that you need to stack the deck in terms of customer acquisition and revenue generation so that you can stay in business, so that you have a means for putting cash in the door every single day so that you can invest in the things that you need to grow.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of these notes and there's been a lot that we've gained already. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back for some more insights from you.
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
We're back with Kelly Roach. And before the break, we learned a ton. We talked about playing the long game because there's really no overnight success. We talked about if you're starting a podcast, you should teach your gift. You should start with what you know and make sure that it's natural and not scripted. And we even learned how that she is literally being natural and just teaching what she knows on her podcast. And it's flawless. I love it. And we want you to be flawless as well. Over the last 6 years, she spent each week trying to be on at least 2 podcasts a week to grow the brand. And that's a huge example to you of what you can be doing. You record 1 episode a week for your show, 2 episodes a week on other people's shows. And in a few years, you might have a podcast that played the long game that got you in front of the right people. I brought up a quote, practice until you can get it versus practice until you can't not get it. You want to practice until you can't not get it. Do this so much where it's flawless, it's fluid. She also mentioned that podcasters stop their podcast. That means you might stop your podcast if you don't figure out how to grow it. So figure out the things that you need to get in front of the right people. Also mention just some entrepreneurship things because she's a business coach. She has 6 businesses and it started with her coaching business. Then she brought on the podcast to grow her brand. We talked about that as well. She started the podcast to grow her brand. And if you want to be growing your brand, if you want to be growing your podcast, if you want to be starting new businesses, here's some quick advice. 1, you can make sure you're cash comfortable before you start that other business. She also had a tip like you might have a second business as well. Number 2, build your leadership team. Number 3, survive if your company can survive without your attention. Huge. And then there was 3 more things. First, build your team right away. And we always have that dilemma. When do I build? How do I build? And she gave these tips. Fractional roles, have an admin or operational person first for a very first hire, and then somebody for revenue production. So a salesperson, a marketing person, somewhere for revenue production. And the second big thing was you have to have a brand. How do you do that? That's your podcast. That's your book. That's your YouTube. That's your blog. That's you making sure people can talk about you even when you're not in the room. Third is learn how to launch. And we're going to talk now a little bit more about how to launch, how to prepare for a launch. And then we're going to get into how do we grow your podcast with Kelly Roach. Kelly, we talked about learning to launch, but I don't think we got enough detail. Like, what would you say we ought to do to prepare to launch a podcast or a business?
I think you need to get really clear first and foremost on what your North Star is in terms of the result that you want to be known for. So everything that you do should tie back to that one thing. So for me, for example, I have 6 companies, but I have one thing that I want to be known for, and that's growth. I want to own the word growth in the mind of every entrepreneur in the online space. I want them to know that when they want to grow, they go find Kelly Roach's portfolio and they find the right product within that to help them get to where they want to be. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to get crystal clear on what is the outcome, the result that you want to be known for, that everything that you do is going to tie back to. And having clarity around that is a great starting point because then it makes it really easy to know, should I do this or should I not do this? What should my focus be? What should I talk about? And you simply ask the question, is this in support of my North Star? Does this align with my one big goal? And if you set that North Star, it makes kind of everything that you do from there easy. The second thing is you have to build an audience, right? You need to build an audience. It doesn't matter whether you're launching a business, launching a podcast, whatever you're doing, you have to get people that want to hear from you and that want to know what you have to say. And both a podcast and a business are going to help you to build that audience. But you have to actively be a participant in intentionally building that audience. And how do you do that? You do lead generation. You put out content each day. You host meaningful conversations with the market. If I was starting over from nothing today, I would be live every single day. That is the greatest gift that was ever given to entrepreneurs, that you have the ability to do an infomercial to billions of people for free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It couldn't be easier, but you have to show up.
Where do you go live? Is that a Facebook Live or what?
Yeah, I was live in 2 different Facebook groups this morning, actually. You can go live on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Now there's LinkedIn Live, X, wherever you want to grow your audience. But just get out there and add value and do it imperfectly. I think that's the biggest thing. I think people, when they're early stage in their businesses or their podcasts, they just want everything to be perfect. And you can't be perfect. No one's perfect. Anyway, imperfect action is literally the make or break ingredient of successful entrepreneurship. So you need to throw that idea to the curb and instead say, I want to learn as fast as humanly possible how to strive for excellence. And the way that you can learn as fast as possible is through execution and execution alone.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Like, we think we can learn a lot from books, but the book gives us a lot of general ideas, helpful tips. It can streamline some things, but I don't think you could, for example, learn how to box without actually boxing. Because once you really get punched in the face, it changes how you feel. It's, whoa, I didn't expect that. You can read it, you can learn it, you can hear it on a podcast, but really you learn by making those mistakes. And I think a lot of people are afraid to start a business because I guess we're taught in school that mistakes are bad, you'll get an F or whatever, but I like that you're letting us know that's normal, because for an entrepreneur who's maybe not grown it that much or has been scared, it feels comfortable to hear you say that those mistakes they're good for us and you're not just going to get an F.
Yeah. And I say this all the time. Becoming a successful entrepreneur requires a lot of unlearning because of exactly what you just shared. We are taught for so many years that failure is bad, that failure will ruin your life, literally the threat of your life for failing. And so you have to realize that's the gate that unlocks successful entrepreneurship. And it is the exact opposite of everything that was drilled into your head for at least 18, maybe 21, 22 years of your life. So recognizing that you have to unlearn that in order to unlock the key is very important because it changes things. Right?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast and some of the things that you did to grow your show. What takeaways do we have for the listener?
Definitely sharing it multiple times a week on social media every single week. That's a non-negotiable.
Go into that. How do you do that? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So many weeks I'll record a 1-minute promo video of what the podcast is about. And I'll give a snippet of what the podcast is about. And then I'll say comment podcast and I'll link the episode for you. So it's doing things like that, or doing a post and talking about what they're going to get out of it, what they're going to learn, and then saying comment podcast and I'll give you the link. Because obviously the other platforms don't love when you're linking things outside the platform. So it's better if you have them comment and then you share it back. But yeah, sharing on social media multiple times a week, every single week, non-negotiable, doing things like...
Can I clarify that? Mm-hmm. Is that you record a minute of a promo about an episode that you want people to know, and you post that same minute promo many times that week, or is it done a different way?
Nope, just one time. I'll post that one time, but I might post that on multiple platforms. And then I'll do a long form post giving them an overview of what they're going to get. So that's a second type of promo that we do every single week. That's just overviewing what they're going to learn and inviting them to request the link. So those are 2 ways right there. The third way is emailing it out to your email list, which I did for many years. Just literally, again, what's the podcast about? What's in it for them? Why should they listen now? And give them the link to listen. So twice a week on social media, minimum. Definitely 1 email a week to the list. Going on as many podcasts each week as humanly possible. And then just making sure that you look at all the different touch points that you have with your market in terms of how you're building the brand overall and how you're marketing the brand, and making sure that the podcast is a part of every single one of those touch points.
That reminds me of a huge mistake that I made, and I won't share too much of this story right now, but I started a podcast and it wasn't a congruent message everywhere. I knew the person that I wanted to attract. I knew what I wanted them to know or do, which are two separate things, but I went about it completely differently. It was like the spaghetti at the wall, right? I just tried things, added content, but my failure, and now that I've learned, because failure is good, my failure was that I was adding value to the wrong person most of the time. Essentially, it's because I was adding value to very many people, and only 20% of the time was the value that I was actually putting on my podcast really for the person that I wanted to work with. And so I've felt that I've done that the wrong way. So you do one promo video that's about a minute. You do a long form post, and then you do your email list. Is there anything else you're doing to promote your podcast as on top of that?
Gosh, I'm sure there's 100 other things that a team is doing. One of the things that they quite often do is as we get new followers on LinkedIn, on Instagram, etc., we always in the welcome messages introduce them to the podcast. So that's what I mean when I say making sure that the podcast is intertwined in every single marketing touch point of the brand. So someone's new to our Facebook group, someone's new to following us on a platform. One of the very first touch points that we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, did you know that Kelly has a podcast? This is what it's about. This is what you're going to get out of it. The episodes are 20 minutes or less. Here's a link if you want to check it out.
Yeah. I love it. I'm going through this. You've shared a lot of cool stuff, some things that I think are really effective for a lot of entrepreneurs, people that are starting a podcast. One thing is when I started my first show, I thought, so dumb. I thought Apple is going to be like, oh my gosh, Adam started a podcast. This is amazing. We got to get it out to millions of people.
Yeah.
And when that didn't happen and I just had the crickets, it was like, what is happening? Like all these other podcasters that I know, Kelly Roach and name a few others, they're massively successful. And Apple wasn't so excited that I started a podcast. So it's like, what the heck's happening? But you're talking about how we take that into our own hands. We tell everybody. And we've got people, entrepreneurs that are afraid to tell people what they do. They don't want to upset anyone. They don't want to cross any lines. And you're here putting on a Facebook post, a promo video, and there's a tip that you mentioned that was critical. Comment below the word whatever if you want the link. And that's effective because most people, they put the link in the post, and then some other people, they put the link like in the comments. And either way, you don't get the value because you really want the engagement. If you get more engagement, then you're triggering algorithms. But additionally, you've got people saying, this is social proofing. Like everybody else wants this. I guess I should want this too.
Exactly.
So it's huge. So you do the long form post, and then you do the email list, tell them what it's about, what they're going to get out of it. And you talk about it in other places. And you said, again, the podcast is intertwined in everything. And earlier, you also mentioned at the end, if I ask you, where do people find you? You're not going to say, my Facebook handle is this, my YouTube handle is this. You're not going to go through a whole laundry list. You're going to just say, go to my podcast.
100%.
And people are afraid of that. I know a lot of people that are like, no, I've got to do my book. I've got to do this. If they don't know my website, then I'm screwed. Why do you just say the podcast?
Because listen, if for someone to hear you on a podcast and then think that they're going to go to your website and then do what, right? They might go to your website for 30 seconds. And then when they leave the website, they're never going to go again. And it doesn't matter. It's like you miss the opportunity. Whereas when someone is listening to you on a podcast and they like you enough to take a new action, the best action you could get them to take is to get them to go and consume more of your content so that you can actually move them down through the know, like, trust, and buy process. So it doesn't mean that when you're doing a specific campaign, I'm a best-selling author. I have books. I love to promote my books. I do media promoting my books quite often. It doesn't mean that when you're in a specific campaign that you don't rotate through the things that you're promoting, but you're going to get a lot more traction if you can get people listening to your long form content than anything else that you're going to do.
So if you're a podcaster, and you are, be going and having your call to action just be your free podcast. I love it. Kelly, I appreciate you. And for the listener, we've already linked up your podcast in our show notes right now. So the listener can just scroll down, click on it, and it'll be a direct link so they can connect with you there. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing so much wisdom. Thank you. And to the listener, the next episode is going to be a solo episode. It's just you and me, something a little short, and it's actually something in podcasting that I know you need. So don't go anywhere. I'll see you right there.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.